an officer?
You know, I understand and appreciate the comment that you made and why you said it. But if I were to answer that question, I'd be contradicting what I said a moment ago, which is to say that all employees are entitled to due process, and after that due process, discipline will be determined. If I were to say anything else, I would actually be contradicting the idea of due process.
One final question. What's your expectation for how a significantly white police force here in Brooklyn Center treats the black and brown members of this community? What expectation have you communicated down to the chief and to the officers under him for how they are to interface with the vast majority, because the vast majority of this population is black and brown? How have you communicated to them to interface and interact with people who look like me?
Absolutely, I've communicated that to the chief, and I do believe that the chief concurs with the notion that every resident of Brooklyn Center must be treated fairly, must be treated equitably. The city council has been very clear in its expectations about fairness and equity. We are implementing this year an Office of Anti-Racism Principles and Practices. We are hiring an equity officer in the next several weeks. The city council has provided specific direction about accountability for the police department and transparency for the police department. We've been providing reports to the city.
Talk to us about the
city council. Yes, we're providing reports to the city council about officer discipline, about information on stops, of black and brown people or people of color in the city of Brooklyn Center. We're developing some task forces to assess if any of our
immediately to send a message that this type of behavior will not be condoned within the city of Brooklyn Center.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments.
Should an officer who can't tell the difference between a taser and a handgun, should they go out in a vehicle with both items in their car?
It really wouldn't be appropriate for me to respond to that.
Why would it not be appropriate, sir?
Because I can't make that judgment.
So as a supervisor of the police force, were you part of the decision last night to use tear gas on our youth who were protesting yesterday? And rubber bullets?
I was not.
Mr. City Manager, Mr. Mayor, when I asked that question about the firing of the police officer, the police chief left.
Yeah.
What is that an indication of? Is he dealing with something perhaps more important, or is that some type of silent protest? Because he left immediately.
I can't speculate.
Mr. Mayor, you have a comment?
I do not know why the excuse me.
Does that bother you without knowing why that he just walked out?
I do not know why the chief left. I can only speculate as to why he left at the time that he did.
Does it bother you?
What would your speculation be?
I don't have any speculation. I mean, it's possible that the chief takes a position perhaps similar to the city manager, that there needs to be some kind of a process, or I don't know. I mean, I would only.
What was the conversation between you and the chief? What was that conversation between you and the chief when you shared with the chief that you'd like to see this officer terminated? He didn't tell us anything.
The police office, and what is the normal protocol? What is the process for who decides, and how does that decision happen? And then were those protocols and that process followed last night?
All right. So I will have the city manager and the chief speak on that, but I'll speak first. My role becomes active the moment that I declare a state of emergency, and if the city council acts to give the mayor authority over the police, or under their circumstances if there's a declaration of martial law. And so my role really is one of influence in those situations. I cannot give commands to the department. I cannot instruct the police chief to take certain actions or not to take certain actions. The person who can do that is the city manager. And so in terms of what the person who can do that is the city manager. And so in terms of what the protocols are and for handling protests. I imagine the chief will be coming back to join us and speak on that.
Involved shooting. What happens is I have no contact with that investigation because I don't want to taint that investigation. People can say they scoff at that. I looked at this video, which is unprecedented. I don't know if any chief has done that very often or has looked at that video in advance of that. Sometimes you can't unwatch a video. So hold on, let me finish. Let me finish, please. So what I'm saying is I have limited information. I'm not trying to be disingenuous, but I'm trying to stay away from the investigation. I wish the BCA was here, but again, they probably tell you the same thing, that there's not much they can do because it's an early investigation. Now, please, one question at a time. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We really demand to know the information of the officer involved in the shooting.
Okay. The first question is we do have a process in place, and that's leaning on the BCA to do their investigation. Every shooting that I've seen, every shooting that I've witnessed has been different. Every circumstance is different around every shooting. It's tragic every time. The loss of life is obviously tragic, but there are different circumstances around every situation. In this particular situation, it was very important for me to get that video out as quickly as possible, and that's what I did.
Chief, absolutely unprecedented. I lived in Minnesota 7 years, worked here. Can you just tell us a little bit about how long the officer was on the force here in Brooklyn Center? Was she around when Barway was pulled from the body of water 6 years ago today?
The information on the officer is she's a very senior officer. That's the extent that I can do. A very senior officer, and I do believe that the BCA will be releasing all the information, training records, everything that they have. They'll be releasing that. That's public data. That'll be coming out shortly.
And Chief, what is the normal protocol and process for response to protesters and was that protocol and process followed last night?
There was strict adherence to the policy of working with the protest.
The lights off. What was your thinking about turning off the lights in the midst of people coming and
Sure.
attempting to redress
Sure.
At the police station? What was your decision behind turning off all the lights?
I don't know about the lights on the street, but I know the building lights were turned off because they created a backlighting for the officers that were on the front lines. They became targets for concrete blocks, frozen cans that I personally saw and ducked. So that's what I turned those lights off. So that
turning off the lights made them less of targets? Or?
Yes, they weren't backlit. So then the people that were in front, they couldn't see it. So if we have lights in front of us, that's what the police department would like to have. We'd like to be looking out forward, not behind us, because then you get backlit.
So the lights that I'm talking about were all around. So the lights were all around the front part of the building. The police were well behind that, but it just created an entire darkness around. It seemed very unusual for a station to have all the lights off, including the lights all in the streets, to create utter darkness and a lot of confusion and a real ominous kind of mood. And I would say that it's very unusual. I've been to a lot of police stations. I've been to a lot of police stations. I've been to a lot of protests. I've been to a lot of these type of events. I have never seen the police department utterly
with frozen cans of pop. They were being belted with concrete blocks. And yes, we had our helmets on and we had other protection gear, but an officer was injured, hit in the head with a brick. That was a Hennepin County deputy. He was transported to the hospital. So we had to make decisions. We had to disperse the crowd because we can't allow our officers to be harmed. And I've already answered the question, I believe, about your lighting. I know that's a big deal with you, and I understand that, but I thought I've explained that myself. So that is, I told you it's my decision, and that's why I made that decision. Is there another question? Yes, ma'am.
I mean, the room's tense. I can feel it.
Yes, ma'am.
What is on your heart?
He's defensive.
Let him answer, guys.
Sure.
Speak to us for real. Like, keep it 100.
This is what I'm here for. Okay? I'm the leader of this department. They expect me to lead, to create a safe city. That's what I'm trying to do. So that's it.
I hope you're not crying, too.
Okay? And, yeah, I'm emotional.
Guys, he's being honest.
I'm just trying to be honest. So.
When I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When you asked the protesters to take a step back across the street, what was the reasoning for, after they went across the street, you shot tear gas grenades and flashbangs where the people were across the street where you had originally told them to be?
Sure. The only time that we return, in every situation, absolutely not. We had a situation We had a situation where we were bringing in an arrest team, and we were worried. How many people are we going to arrest? When we started to move the people, finally, hours into the situation, you know how many people we arrested that stayed? 2 people. If we hadn't done that, if we hadn't moved people along, I don't know what would have happened. And I don't know where they would have reformed. But the people that left were allowed to leave. We didn't trap them. We didn't make mass arrests. We arrested 2 people.
So what are the plans for tonight?
Tonight we're going. If it's a peaceful protest, if it's a First Amendment protest, go to it.
I guess what's your
We'll
definition of a peaceful protest? Because we don't understand.
Yeah, not being pelted with bricks, blocks, and being targeted.
What we saw yesterday were young people up with their hands up.
Yeah.
And they were being tear gassed. And you were talking about your officers being hurt. We can count how many people got hurt yesterday too.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to ask again. Are you planning on doing things differently tonight?
We are going to have our officers lined up to protect this building, to protect the city as best we can. That's what we're going to do today, and that's what we do every day.
I got one more question. When the officers were firing tear gas and flashbangs, there was an apartment complex with families behind it, and that's where a lot of the flashbangs were going. Had a flashbang went into one of those windows and started that building on fire, it put a lot of other people at risk.
Okay.
Why?
I didn't see any flashbang that was very close to those apartments. 1400, 67th, I was there. I didn't see anybody.
6700 Humboldt.
40, 6740.
Right overhead, over the building.
Okay.
And we saw that last night.
And I didn't see that myself.
Final question. So, Police Chief, we hear that you have committed to protecting this building and protecting the city tonight if there are protests. Will you commit to protecting protesters and the people of this city?
I am committed to protecting the peaceful protesters of the city every day.
Not yesterday.
Peaceful protesters.
I was peaceful protesters,
Yeah.
and they were targeting me.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, everybody. Just to reiterate, my commitment, our commitment as a city, and in many ways we need to recommit to that. That is to making sure that we are protecting peaceful protesters. We're protecting the rights of people to gather and grieve and give their grievances to the government. And so we're going to work to continue to protect those rights, protect peaceful protesters, and to make sure that we're also securing the safety of our community. Securing the safety of our community. Thank you.
Understand that when peaceful protesters gather and they are met with violence, that things are going to escalate, and at that point you can't blame them and call them rioters?